Hi, thank you for joining us for another Massachusetts Pirate News. Today I'm joined by Steve. Unfortunately, Joe and Malt are having a fun, restful time this hot summer, and we hope they have a great time. Steve and I are going to talk about some things we've been doing of late. Just so you know, and I put a link in the description. We're going to be having our Pirate Moot in 2 weeks. And you can join us and help planning for the 2023. Wow, can you believe it? 2023 local elections. Town elections are in the first half, and city elections are in the second half of the year. So if you want to help us with that, as well as organizing Pirate Party chapters in your community or your school or your college, feel free to check out masspirates.org and fill out our volunteer form, or to send us an email at info@masspirates.org. So, Steve, how have you been?
This weekend a little bit hot and sweaty. It's that time in eastern Massachusetts. Once upon a time, August was the month where you had temperatures in the 90s and the humidity slightly higher, and now this seems to start a little earlier, typically mid-July where we are now. So, it's icky and sticky, but it's summer.
Absolutely. At least we're not in Europe, right?
I haven't been following weather patterns in Europe. Because I'm a bicycle commuter, I'm sort of glued to, NOAA's national map and then and local maps at least one or two times a day. The Southwest and lower Midwest have really been getting baked this last year. There was a cool looking weather pattern. It was basically basically it was a big heat wave, but it had this massive eye right over Missouri, and it was very ominous looking. But yeah, they had trip. There's parts of the country that have been having triple-digit temperatures. We thankfully have not been among them, at least not yet, and not this year. So I am thankful for that.
Unfortunately, we have been having a bit of a drought situation. Mm-hmm. So, we certainly would encourage people to conserve water and be careful what you have. If you can set up rain barrels and capture some of the rain when it comes, that's always a good alternative. There's some good ones out there as well. Some of the wildfires in Portugal and France mm-hmm. have looked like what we've seen in California, earlier in the year or last year. So,
yeah, I'm sort of curious to see if, to what extent that, that sort of thing happens, around in the Northeast over time. Because we do have, the sort of ingredients for forest fires are drought, and then red flag conditions, which are low humidity and high temperatures and a high wind speed. You add those to a drought, and anything that burns can spread very, very quickly. Even I think it was last year, there was a town in Colorado, not California, not Oregon, but Colorado, that was basically a suburb that was literally obliterated within a matter of a few hours, just because, something caught fire and the wind just, kicked it up.
Absolutely. So one of the ways I know for pirates, we do believe that global warming is real. And what I know, you were out and about engaging in physical transportation. What were you attending?
Well, the term of art is active transportation. So that's sort of like the planner term, or the transportation engineer term. It means like getting around on your own power. Now being a bike commuter, I do that routinely, but once in a while, it is nice to do social events. And there is a group called, I discovered them during the pandemic, Boston Bike Party, and they had been, they have a history of organizing group rides through the Boston area, I guess once a month. But this past Friday was the first one they'd organized since the pandemic started. And boy, did a lot of people turn out. The ride left from Copley Square in Boston, and standing on for a brief period, before the ride let off, I was, got to stand on the steps of the church, look across, and, basically the entire square was filled with people with bicycles. And we had a grand old time riding around Back Bay, the West End, the Seaport, and parts of Cambridge and Harvard Square. So it was a lot of fun. People dress up, they bring their sound systems. It's a fun social event.
So when is the next one?
I don't know. They have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, so I just follow those. It's the Twitter account is at Boston Bike Party. Not sure what the Facebook page is. I tend not to use Facebook too much. So
I conveniently put it in the chat log, so
cool.
Folks can find it there. So those are monthly, basically.
That's what I believe that's what the schedule had been prior to the pandemic. There are, I think with the pandemic, people have been locked up, been cooped up in their homes more than they would be normally. And there's also been, I gather, some renewed interest in getting around by bicycle, just because it's a mode of transit that doesn't put you in an enclosed space with other people. So there are newcomers to cycling, which is great to see. I'm a big fan of what the Dutch did when they were facing really bad congestion problems and infrastructure maintenance problems in the early 70s. They just started building bike infrastructure. It's much more cost effective. And when you give people safe places to ride, you basically encourage them to do that. I know plenty of people who tell me, like, I'd love to bike to work, but I just don't feel safe doing it. So you give them a safe route, and this is a way to reduce traffic congestion. Boston being the second or first most congested metro in the U.S., that's an important thing. Riding a bicycle produces no carbon emissions. I mean, if you want to get technical, sure, an e-bike, depending on how you charge it, but it's a far smaller footprint than an electric vehicle. It's a really clean mode of transit, and it's fun and it's liberating, and that's important too.
Absolutely. Just for folks, their website, the Facebook page says the Boston Bike Party is the second Friday of the month, meeting at Copley Square at 7 p.m. Cool. Yeah, I can't disagree with you. Having visited Amsterdam back before the pandemic, it was amazing not only to see people out bicycling, but literally nobody wore a helmet. Mm-hmm. And having certainly heard enough about people who didn't wear helmets and end up getting cut off by cars or somehow thrown off their bike and dying, if people feel comfortable that their bike lanes are separate from cars, and that was my experience seeing them, then they're going to be able to walk around without fear or sorry, bike around without fear and having to worry
Mhm.
about helmets and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
it's definitely, sort of around here. I've been cut off by cars and, you know, um, clipped here and there, and the helmet is, I've broken a couple of helmets, and it's, we'll talk about auto accidents later on. But so one of the things that I tend to do you know tend to do, and I'm glad that we kind of support this as a party, is try to advocate for you know reduced carbon emissions, more sustainable modes of transit, and more bike lanes.
yeah, speaking of bike lanes, we were talking before about how Somerville has a whole draft bike plan, bike network that they've put together. In terms of some off-street parking, but also protected bike lanes, one-way protected bike lanes, and neighborhood ways and shared streets and things like that. It's good to see Somerville, the most densely populated city in Massachusetts, embracing that. It's not necessarily the most yeah, I mean, considering how dense you'd think we would have done this decades ago, but it's
Mhm.
better late than never.
Yeah, I mean, part of the I think there's a generational sort of thing where once upon a time cars were going to be the thing that liberated us from cities, and that didn't quite exactly work out. And especially when you try, cars and cities do not necessarily mix all that well together. Um, Cars are, if you want to, if you live in a rural area where things are really spread out, Somerville is a very walkable city. It's got great walk scores, meaning that you can make a lot of trips without having to get into a car. And when I lived in Somerville for a couple of years, and I owned a vehicle. I never drove it, and it was just kind of an annoying thing to have to move it, because Somerville, they will ticket you if you leave your vehicle parked for more than 2 days in a row in the same place. But, I didn't culturally, the idea of not having a car just never occurred to me. And, I think that's definitely an American kind of thing to a certain extent. But, there, it's, we've taken if every, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail, and have just been applying that to transportation policy for decades and decades and decades. So hopefully this turns around at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to some of the way you look at old pictures from Somerville or Boston where there were bigger sidewalks. I mean, I know Broadway specifically in Somerville, which kind of goes from Arlington on one side to East Boston on the other. No, sorry, to not East Boston,
Charlestown.
Charlestown. Thank you. Used to have very wide sidewalks, and come the 50s and 60s, when it's like, no, the cars, we have to design roads for the cars and not for pedestrians. And so they maximize throughput, maximize the number of cars they could get at the expense of pedestrians, and at the expense thus of the businesses who are there, because they had far less foot traffic. And harking back to that Pixar Cars movie, when you get bypassed, that's what bad economic things happen.
Well, I mean, thinking about older pre-automobile approaches to urban design, I think I think Knoxville, Tennessee is a great example of the contrast. So I've spent a week there once visiting friends, right? but there is sort of the old downtown, which was, late 1800s, early 1900s. It's a compact grid. It's the, there are, it's very easy to walk around. There are bicycle lanes. It's, the traffic, it is not high speed traffic. You go a little bit outside of that into the area that was, sort of built out post World War II, the neighborhoods of what they call Knox boxes, small suburban style homes. And it's, there's a lot more, the roadways are less friendly to, frankly, anyone who's not driving. And, this isn't so much a nostalgia, or I don't think it's sort of a nostalgia sort of thing, but, I think when we were designing streets for, people riding trolleys, people walking, people riding bicycles, they're just, more people centric. And, what we did with suburbs was decide that, we made an environment where things are car centric.
Absolutely. So speaking of cars, something happened in Porter Square.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, we'll put a link to, we'll put a link to a local news story about this, but so Porter Square is, sort of this little business district between, right on the border of Cambridge and Somerville. There's a train station there. There's a little shopping mall. There's a bunch of restaurants, a Target, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a driver who was traveling southbound on Mass Ave. They make a left turn onto Somerville Avenue. And instead of following Somerville Avenue, they hopped a curb, went across a plaza and into the facade of a bank. I mean, it's the kind of thing I've been through this intersection a whole bunch of times and I'm like, how does one do this? And, to me, part of this is, I wish talking about the Dutch again, whenever they have a car crash, whenever there are vehicle crashes, one of the things that gets looked at is not just the weather and was there, the driver distracted or was it a problem with the vehicle? But they also look at what role the infrastructure, the roadway, played. Now this one, it does have a little bit of a curve, but I mean, it's pretty obvious when you look at it. This is, it's another one of those things where I think the U.S. could learn from other countries. And it's also an example of, sort of the way that, we tend to accept certain externalities. I mean, one of the characteristics of the United States are mass shootings. They don't really happen anywhere else in the world, but they happen here. And, despite the fact that, for better or worse, and probably for worse, we just more or less accept it as a fact of life, which is more or less accepted as a fact of life. The same thing with vehicles the same thing with people driving vehicles into buildings. That is another, it's a case of, person drives into building. Oh, well, it was just an accident. I mean, or, it's the driver, or you say it's, the driver's responsibility and there's not like any societal or systemic thing that we can do. When, I think the other countries in the world have shown us that that's, quite wrong. Till then, just, bollards are your friend.
Well, that's the thing about pirates is we're very data driven. So we want to look at those statistics and determine this intersection has more crashes or more pedestrian persons getting hit by cars or even bicycles or fatalities or things like that. And why is that? And as you pointed out, how do we redesign an intersection so that it's less likely to happen? But if we're not willing to gather the data and we don't have people advocating on behalf of that data for better solutions, then we get, as you said, the situation that we have. So,
Well, in terms of crash statistics, those are something that's generally readily available to a municipality. So you can, I mean, it's basically, often it's police reports. So you can, or I think Mass DOT also collects statistics on crashes. So I would expect that, people in, the local planning office of your city or town know where the high crash intersections are. There are also, design, design patterns that will produce safer intersections. And a lot of it really boils down to money and political will, because roadway infrastructure changes are not cheap. And, for a lot of municipalities spending, $4 or $5 million to improve a road intersection is, not chump change. There's also there's also a political aspect to it. The political will component to it. The tendency to leave things in the status quo, and our status quo has been basically making roadways where that encourage people to drive faster than they really should, given the context.
I couldn't agree with you more. So our last, one of the things we discussed before, I'll just mention it, is the expansion of rail trails and bike paths. We won't go into that. I'll put a link in the description, and just if folks want to go and see what rail trails there are around. But the other thing I wanted us to discuss is there's a group that I've been part of, and that's originally started out as MassMesh.org. And that came out as a result of the Trump FEC gutting net neutrality. And there are a lot of good folks involved in that, and they came up with a wonderful set of software packages that allow you to take a Raspberry Pi and hook it up to, say, a Ubiquiti access point, and be able to connect that to the internet, such that when someone goes into your access point, they're not going straight onto the internet, but they're instead going over a network, an encrypted network that exists on top of the internet. And by doing that, they get around all of the spying that your ISP does, or packet injection, sticking ads in. And so MassMesh is focused on the tech side, and there's a local group that I'm a part of called meshboston.net. And we had our first tabling event at the MIT Swap Fest, which is once a month. You can find it by searching. I'll put a link in the description and the chat. And so it was a good opportunity. I mean, both the Swap Fest is a great thing if you're looking for used electronic hardware or camera stuff, or electronics or TVs, stereos, whatever. It is a good place to come to find useful stuff, so it doesn't go into a landfill. So it can be reused and repurposed and used again. But we were there, and we met a lot of people who were interested. So, it was great talking with people and getting out and explaining what we're doing with this project and how they can help and the advantages of that. So, yay.
Well, I have a question about that. Now,
Sure.
My understanding was that, aside from the privacy aspects of, running of running a mesh net. One of the objectives is to provide internet access to people who might not necessarily have it, or just sort of a secondary infrastructure. I seem to remember something about Hurricane Sandy and ad hoc people setting up mesh networks as a way to communicate, even with even with a lot of the main ISP facilities compromised by the hurricane. Is that something that that the group is working on, or could you talk about that?
Sure. So it's an interesting approach because in a sense, we're meshing two ways. One is each of the nodes can talk with other nodes that are within a suitable distance. And that depends on your hardware. So if you've got a Wi-Fi point that is broadcasting 360 degrees, then that's going to be more limited than if you have one that's pointed in a particular direction as some antenna or something like that. Mm-hmm. But those can talk to one another. And so in that sense, provided you have power, we can go and provide that connectivity. And the nice thing about using the network we do on top of the internet, it's called Yggdrasil, is that you can have nodes that exist within that network. And that could be you could set up a server that's on that network at a data center, or you could set it up in your home as a Freedom Box or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so it has the ability, again, provided you have power, to be able to mesh and allow people to get in and at least be able to communicate with one another when your internet service provider might be down. And then the other mesh aspect is the whole Yggdrasil or Yggdrasil network, where that goes and allows you to connect to all these other nodes. There's a search node that'll allow you to search other sites, and different people have different things set up. And so you're able to do that. And so through that, you kind of mesh in two ways. You have at the hardware level and then at this kind of IP level as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yes.
Cool. So yeah, we had a really good time meeting with folks. We're looking for other events to set up a table at. I just realized yesterday that the Somerville Art Beat was yesterday, and that would have been a prime opportunity. So we'll plan for that for next year. And there's other things coming up because it's important to tell people that alternatives exist to Comcast and other for-profit internet service providers that really don't care about your privacy. And so that's the nice thing about it, is we're a bunch of hobbyists and we want to build out a network and share internet to other people, not limit it to the Fioses and the Comcasts and others, Charter Communication and whatever. And where we care about your privacy. And there's no fee involved. The software is open source, and all you have to do is buy the hardware, and we have instructions for installing it. And then we're looking at other things of maybe getting nodes all set up. And then it's just simply a matter of you sign up for it, pay a fee, and then we just bring you the node and set it up for you and hook things up. So
nice.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it, and there's the only place to go is up.
So is like installing an antenna, like the antenna that you would need to run one of these things, is that something that a typical person can do? Do you need to hire an electrician, or does it involve climbing way up on a ladder, or?
No, it doesn't involve climbing up on a ladder. I mean, we encourage folks to put the nodes outside. Like we've been using the Ubiquiti UAC mesh router, which is designed to be used outside, though it can be used inside. So you could theoretically put it either outside your window or right at the edge of your window or something like that. So there's different ways of setting it up, and those nodes use LibreMesh, which is an open source FOSS software that folks can use and flash onto their Wi-Fi access points, and those folks have a lot of access points that they support. So it's nice to be able to get older hardware and still put them to use, even if the manufacturer no longer supports them.
Yeah, totally.
Reduce, reuse, recycle, and all that. Right to repair. Yay.
Yes.
So with that, thank you, Steve. Great conversation. And we thank everyone for watching our generally weekly videos. You can always find us at masspirates.org. And please sign up for our mailing list. You can find us on Twitter at Mass Pirates. You can find us on Facebook at Mass Pirates. We're always looking for people who want to help out. So as always, thank you very much. Have a great time, and share, like, subscribe, all that other stuff. Take care, folks.
Have a great week.